You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory. With Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Kevin Laramee joined by Duane Rollins. Once again, Duane is on the phone. Duane, we had a lot of things to talk about on the docket, but a Chicago business news website kind of dropped a little bombshell on us just before we were ready to go on the air. Apparently, Duane, according to sources close to the project, in 2017, the MLS AllStar Game will be, drum roll please, at Soldier Field?
Yeah, I guess so. The drum roll wasn't very good. I don't know if anyone heard that. I hope not. Yeah, Soldier Field sits at 61,500. So this tells me, Kevin, and this is what I was saying to you off air, that they're not going to an East-West format. If they're trying to put that game into a stadium that seats 61,000, I don't think there are 61,000 people in the city of Chicago that are interested to watching whether, the Western Conference of Major League Soccer is better than the Eastern Conference in a one-off game. I think they're probably bringing in one of the big teams of the world for this All-Star Game, and the format continues. And there have been a lot of people that have been sort of clamoring for a change in that format for a while, but I think MLS likes it quite clearly.
In Chicago, Soldier Field, 61,000, the home of the Chicago Bears. Yes, the Bears. For the National Football League, American football on the lakefront. It's going to be a nice evening in Chicago, but I'm wondering if there's a way to get 61,000 people in there. If Barcelona or Real Madrid are the only two teams that would gather that type of attention, or maybe United or something. Maybe it's one of those three clubs.
Liverpool might be able to as well. I would think that it would have to be one of those teams in there. Even like you look at a Chelsea, City. I don't think any of those clubs. Bayern Munich's been in before. It's been recent on that. Arsenal has a lot of fans. Arsenal might be able to as well, but they played recently, very recently. I would go with one of the two Spanish guys if I was guessing. That is, I don't know. I don't really, the format, I get it, but I don't really like it anymore. I don't really like the All-Star Game at all in many ways. I think maybe the league has outgrown it a bit, but I believe that their partners really, really like it. And that's what it's all about, the All-Star Game. And that's, I think, what we fans and observers need to understand about the MLS All-Star Game is it's ultimately about a day where Major League Soccer can bring the CEO of Audi in and go have luncheons and a fun day out in a nice city. And then at the end of the day, they get to bring, all their friends and families, the sponsors, due to watch some big team, and they're there to watch the big team as much as anything else. And that's, I guess, fair. They used to do it at the MLS Cup as well. The neutral site MLS Cup, as I've experienced firsthand, is a very special thing, having a host team in it. So I don't think they should move away from that. But there's the All-Star Game. I guess it is what it is, and maybe it's something that we have to accept based on the fact that the league does need to have some kind of ability to take care of its sponsors so that they can continue to get them and continue to be vibrant. We don't like to talk with the business side of the game, but it's there and it's real.
ChicagoBusiness.com for more information. 2017 MLS All-Star Game, according to sources close to the deal, will be happening at Soldier Field in Chicago. Moving on, Duane, from Chicago to Vancouver. We talked about it last week, but it seems more and more likely now that the NWSL will have a franchise in Vancouver very soon.
Yeah, Mark Webber had an article, a pretty in-depth article in the province today, where he talked kind of the pros and cons and sort of laid it out. It was a general audience article explaining what the NWSL was to maybe someone who's not familiar with it, sort of explaining all the reasons why it might work in Vancouver, expressing kind of the opinion that many of us have had for a while that it's time for Canada to get a team in that league if they're going to be partners in some way. They announced the allocations, by the way, yesterday. I guess the fact that Caitlin Kyle wasn't on it would be the one thing that jumps out for a lot of people from yesterday. Laura Sussman's gone as well, but she was gone the year before. Anyway, moving past that, Kevin, look, there's a lot of pros to the fact of bringing an NWSL team to Vancouver, and I think that starting there, the most obvious pro is the fact that it's time. It's time to have a fully professional at the highest level possible women's team in this country. I think it's shameful is a strong way to put it, but I think it's unfortunate that none of the three MLS teams have stepped up and done that so far.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Sorry to interrupt them, but shameful would have been a little strong because it's never been written and there's never been a clamor for it, and it's always been something that we see Vancouver do it, but it's not an obligation, but it's something that does look well. The optics of it is the perception of having a women's team for the game and the growth of the actual sport in the women's side of it. It's perceived well.
I'm putting my personal ethics into my opinion when I say that, and that's why I'm backing off the word shameful. But I do think that when you have as many female fans as these clubs do, that giving back in a more real way would be something that it makes sense. And in fairness to the Whitecaps, they do have the Excel program out there that is one step further than either Vancouver or for either Toronto or Montreal have. So I do give them credit for that. But if they do go fully professional, good on them. But I think the other part of that, and what Weber really explores in this article, is that he makes the business argument for it, so that it's not just about Vancouver doing the quote-unquote right thing by its female fans. It's doing a business thing. And he explains that if they go do this venture, that they would be playing it in BC Place, and they would be trying to sell 10, 15,000 tickets for these games, which is above probably their break-even point. I suspect a break-even point for an NWSL team is somewhere around 7,000 tickets. So
even then, that seems high. Even then, that seems high when you're looking at the league in itself. The allocation of the U.S. men's national team, the women's national team, does help for the salary part of it. But 68,000, it's more than they have right now. So maybe you're right there. Maybe the breaking even point is a little higher and it's not even reached right now.
Yeah, well, the entire budget Weber puts out that basically the teams are paying about $250,000 in salary, and then you got to factor their travel in and things like that. So you're probably looking at $5 million-6 million probably is what it costs to run these teams over the course of a year, in terms of all of the infrastructure, all of the stuff around it. So if you draw 5 or 6, you could probably be close to a break even at that point. But the teams like Portland which I suspect is who Montreal is looking at.
Vancouver, yes,
probably. Sorry, yeah, Vancouver is probably looking at what's happening in Portland and Seattle to a lesser extent, and trying to emulate that. There's probably pressure because the two Cascadia teams have women's teams to join that mix more than anything else as well. What do you think it would draw out there? We have seen big crowds for the women's national team, but as we see in the United States, that doesn't always translate into a grind of supporting a club team. And Vancouver fans can chime in on Twitter and so forth on our social media whether or not you would support that. Maybe I'll put a poll out later today. Just off the top of your head, I do think that they would do okay, and I do think actually that the Canadian teams, and I don't mean to sound arrogant or looking down my nose at American fans when I say this, but I do think that the Canadian teams in major city markets have shown that there's a few more of them, generally speaking, when it comes to their willingness to buy season tickets and things like that. The Canadian teams are in the top third of the league across the board, so I suspect it would play the same way on the female side. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the launch to be really successful, Duane, I think you can break even and eventually get the ground support to have a 8,000. But if you want to go higher than that, I think there's one thing you need to do. You need to get what might be, when that time comes, one of the best, if not the best goal scorer in the history of the women's game. she might be wanting to play in her backyard. Maybe she wants to play in Vancouver. Maybe that's an idea that would suit her a lot. And maybe you have to open up the checkbook, do whatever you need to do to get Christine Sinclair to be in that inaugural Vancouver Whitecaps woman in the NWSL team roster, to make sure she's part of it. And if you do this, you have a chance of, I think, creating something special. But I think the project really, from good, like it could be good, to make it great and successful, I think it's Christine Sinclair.
Yeah, and that's the pickle. As I said before, if those that are newer to listen to us or didn't hear this episode may not be familiar with this, when Christine Sinclair talked to the media following her Player of the Year award back in December, she was asked directly whether she would be interested in coming to Vancouver if they were to get an NWSL team. I forget the journalist that said it. It was one of the female, like the women's focused journalist. At any rate, her answer was, she kind of laughed and she went, well, that's a tough question. And then she'd been very open through that entire interview. But when that question came, she got a little bit more dodgy, a little bit more trying to talk around the issue, because she didn't, I don't think, want to insult anyone in Vancouver. But what she did say was that she was very happy at Portland, and that Portland felt like her home to her, and that she'd lived in Portland for most of her adult life. And I think that's an important consideration to make. We often do this thing in Canada when we cheer for Canadian teams, that we just assume that the Canadian player, the player from that hometown, is going to want to come home. We do it here in Toronto in a different sport with Andrew Wiggins, right? In basketball, we just assume when he's a free agent that the Toronto kid's going to want to leave Minnesota and come back to the Raptors.
Not thinking that he's been 7 or 8 years in Minnesota and maybe he feels he's even more from Minnesota than Toronto, but that's something else.
Yeah, exactly. But in Sinclair's case, if you listen carefully to what she was saying, I think she does feel like she's from Portland. She went to university there. I suspect she has people that are very close to her personally that live in Portland. So if she's leaving the city of Portland to go back, quote unquote, home, and where you're from is always your home. I'm from Belleville, but there's no way in hell I would ever move back, right?
True. But the beauty of it, though, she could probably still stay in Portland and play for Vancouver.
Yeah, you could do something like that. That would be a bit of a stretch. And she might look at it as her last sort of gift to Canadian soccer, although I will say this as a Canadian soccer fan, Christine Sinclair's probably given us quite a bit already. So I don't think we should...
Sorry to interrupt. Do you know how I see it? Her last chance to make a big buck in an evolving women's game that might have more money into it in North America now than it did a few years ago. Maybe it's her chance to, hey, you do something that you like, you go back to play in your country, in your home city where you were from earlier on in your life, and on top of it, have a nice paycheck every 2 weeks. Why not?
Well, and that is the argument for it from her perspective on a purely cynical level, is that if she stays in Portland, nothing is going to change in terms of her bankability as a spokesperson. We have seen Christine Sinclair in this country take advantage a little bit of her Olympic notoriety. She was in a car commercial last year up here. That was a national car commercial. I'm sure she made a nice little bit of money for that. If she were to play consistently in Vancouver, I don't know whether it would help her nationally much, but it certainly could help her locally in the Vancouver area get a lot more than what she would in Portland, where even though she's well known, even though she's highly successful and Portland fans do love her, she's still ultimately going to be less bankable than a U.S. women's national team player in that city, whereas in Vancouver, or any Canadian city for that matter, but Vancouver is the one we're talking about, she would have the huge potential to go out there and be, like that guy that, the guy or gal that sponsors the juice bar or the car dealership or the whatever. There would be some more financial opportunities for camps, things like that too, although she could do those now. So there is that argument for it. But you're right. Go ahead, Kevin.
Days like yesterday, Bell Let's Dog Day, We've seen Carey Price. We've seen all the teams in Canada that are represented by Bell. So TFC, Raptors, we've seen all in Montreal Impact. We've seen players talking about it. Well, she would have been one of those. So that type of exposure that you can get when you're part of a club in a market that does gather some attention and does have some blue chip sponsors like Bell, like BMO, and like other big Canadian companies.
Yeah, precisely. And there is that argument too there. Well, in terms of her bump, I do think that, yeah, you're right, that having Sinclair on the roster as your first signing, likely, you would likely arrange that and have it happen. I don't know how important, the Thorns would have something to say about this, of course, and we're leaving that aside for now. But if you could arrange it, then yeah, obviously I think that might draw your 5,000-6,000 potential up to 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 even. I'm not sure there's another player in the Canadian pool that could do that has the same level of anywhere close. Who would it be? Jesse Fleming, maybe?
Well, here's my plan, Duane. You bring Fleming too, because there's marketing of shows, right? If you have a weekly show, whether it's episodic or not, so whether it's sports or theater or something, week to week, you want to bring people in for the one attraction that is going to draw people, but you want them to discover something new. So you get Christine Sinclair, which will be the attraction that brings people in, and then guess what? You present them Jesse Fleming, which is the attraction that will bring them back for the next 10 years.
Unless there is a second team that launches in Canada, because there's some logic to that too, and that team would probably be close to me. And Jesse Fleming from Oakville. There's that as well. But no, yeah, you're right in terms of the double prang. It's having some young talent come in, because Christine Sinclair, we're talking about a team that would not launch at the very least until 2018 now. So you're looking at Christine Sinclair that's about to turn 35 when she comes up, if she were to come up. So that would be a short-term boost of interest that would need to be backed up with some level of new stardom, new success, as you say. If we could get a Jesse Fleming in there, or convince a Kadisha Buchanan to the back, or someone like that. Buchanan's a different one because of where she plays, but certainly she would be a key component to any NWSL team one day if she were to come back. Ashley Lawrence as well might fit that bill. So yeah, you'd have to get one of those young players, and we'll see. I do hope this happens. We've been talking about the need for an NWSL team in Canada for some time. I do believe, as I just said, that having an East-West kind of buy-in, and I don't care whether it's in Ottawa, whether it's in Montreal. In fact, I've made the argument before that Ottawa might be a better market for it, just because it would be, something big there, especially with the thing of the Fury. The last thought on this, and we are going to go a little over in the block, but that's fine. There is talk, and this is something that is upsetting some fans out there, that the Whitecaps ownership is not willing to run three professional teams. If they were to bring the NWSL in, that would mean that the Whitecaps 2 would be moved out into some kind of affiliate program. I suspect that affiliate program would probably be outside the country, because then they would not be subjected to the quota rules that they currently are. And I think the Whitecaps' philosophy when it comes to their development program might be a little bit resistant towards some of those things. And I base that on how they skirt those quotas right now, right to the edge, where the other, one team now, but other two teams certainly were way over those quotas in the past. So they seem to be a little bit more bought into that than the Whitecaps 2 were. But we'll see.
By numbers, we're talking about FC Montreal and Toronto FC 2 over the last 2 years, having a Canadian contingent of around 80% spread across the season. And you're looking for Vancouver between 55 and 60, depending on the case, which you see certain disparity there. It's not a lot, not enough to say that it's deliberate, but enough to say that they judge the play maybe more than who the player is that plays that way.
They have a greater interest in giving an equal opportunity to their prospects who are not Canadian. We'll say it like that.
Yeah, and if in a pragmatical way of thinking, if you're just thinking just for the Vancouver Whitecaps, which we are not, it could be justified.
Oh yeah, no, and that's exactly what when Whitecaps fans get mad at me. I point out that my role is not to just support the Whitecaps. It's to support Canadian soccer, and that's why I criticize them sometimes. And I'm not criticizing their decision as a selfish one, because sometimes professional clubs, they need to be selfish, and I get that. But at any rate, we're getting into the weeds now, Kevin. So let's take a break, come back with a few bits and bytes to end a 30-minute show today.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The bits and bytes on Soccer Today. And Duane, we are back. A weird rumor that's been running the last few weeks. Donovan, we all know he wasn't coming back with the Galaxy, with the changes and the direction change that the Galaxy have overtaken. Now, it seems he's not even going to go to RSL as well.
Yeah, it was reported by Grant Wall today that he has turned down the RSL offer. There was no indication on whether that meant that he has decided to retire completely. In fact, that's a weird one, too, that he hasn't come out and outright said that he's no longer going to play. He's just decided not to go back to RSL. And RSL had said and had reported to people openly that they had offered him something that they quote called a lucrative offer. It wasn't the DP range. It was something that was reflective of the fact that he's a bit older. So I doubt it was multi-year, but it certainly was something that would have paid him quite well.
Yeah, probably like a few $100,000 and maybe some TAM on him. So the impact that he has on the cap is not too high, but you're probably thinking about a 2-3, probably more around the 300,000 and up plus TAM for the cap not to be too hit by a Donovan potential signing.
Yeah. Who knows? But yeah, he's irrelevant now because he's not going. But what I find interesting about this is, again, the fact that Donovan's not saying anything, that he's not in anyone's camp, and he's not necessarily saying that he's retired completely again. So is he? Has he? Or has he just assumed that people, like, Donovan's a weird cat, so maybe he just assumes that people just know that he's retired and he'll just move on from there. Like, that's also possible. But nonetheless, I kind of speculate, if you'll allow me that, and that's kind of what this is all about, is that what Donovan's likely doing is he wants to stay in California. He's a California kind of guy, and he maybe is just waiting to see whether he might have a role again to play in the second half of a season if he wants to play. He might play it by ear that way. And that's just the way it is with Donovan right now. Whether that's the Galaxy, who knows? Maybe even San Jose. He does have a history up there with them as well, and he may be willing to take that run up for half of the year.
Now, one letter that's making the round in social media right now, Duane, a letter that here we'll be clear about this. We don't know if it's real. We don't know if it's fake. It's from obscure sources, and it's making its way on the interweb. But apparently, Major League Soccer has sent a letter on January 10th to a businessman and a landowner as well in the St. Louis area. You can find the letters if you want to read the names and all that. You can find it for yourself. Let me just read a little bit the letter quickly. In December 2015, we announced Major League Soccer's plan to expand to 28 clubs, the first two of which are targeted to begin play in 2020. MLS has been working closely with SC St. Louis for over a year, and we firmly believe SC St. Louis is the ideal ownership group to provide St. Louis the best opportunity for a future expansion team. We are confident that your downtown stadium site is the best location for a new MLS stadium. Where it gets interesting even more, it's coming in the second paragraph of that letter. Should SC St. Louis be granted an MLS expansion club and execute the downtown stadium plan, St. Louis will be granted an MLS AllStar Game within 5 years of the St. Louis inaugural MLS season. In addition, as it has done successfully with cities throughout North America, MLS will use best efforts to work with the U.S. Soccer Federation and the CONCACAF, basically, in order to place high-profile international matches in St. Louis. Again, the veracity, the authenticity of that letter is up for debate, but it is interesting, the two notions in this letter, the ownership group and the St. Louis part, and the potential MLS All-Star Game 5 years after the expansion.
Yeah, and look, they've made that promise with an All-Star Game. They made it to Toronto, I know for a fact. So it does seem authentic to me. It seems like a letter that MLS would write. I don't necessarily view it as them showing favoritism to St. Louis any more than they would others, because I suspect that if this letter, in fact, when you showed me this letter, my first response to you is, I bet you it's a form letter, meaning that they send it to all these expansion teams. Because really, if you look at what MLS does in these situations, is they go out and they just try and get as much from the cities as they can, from the groups as they can, to try and get as much support, because they're looking to get the most advantageous deal for themselves. And they're offering all of the things that they could provide for the city in an effort to convince the politicians, to convince the business people in that community why it's worthwhile for them. So it's just kind of a business sense thing. I have no doubt that said, and I've said this before on record, that St. Louis is one of their bigger priorities. It is a big market. It is a market that they've coveted for a long time. And a letter like that doesn't surprise me at all, Kevin.
I know, but I can't get over San Antonio. Since yesterday, since I looked more deeply into it, when you know who's behind the San Antonio project, who's behind the new lease of Toyota Field, the San Antonio Spurs, and when you start to look at the Spurs financially, this is the type of team that usually MLS falls in love with. A team and an organization, investors that have their checks and their books in balance, that has them covered and all well in order. And that's the type of bid that is interesting when you talk about expansion.
It's the ownership, stupid, right? That's what I said yesterday. That's what I'll continue to do. That whoever has the most money, whoever has the most stable ownership, whoever has the best all combinations of things they want is the team that's going to win. But it ultimately comes down to the expansion bid that's going to win. It ultimately comes down to who is best positioned ownership-wise to make it work, and that's what MLS is looking for.
Speaking of best position and ownership, Brad Guzan will be joining Atlanta. Borough confirmed yesterday that Brad Guzan will leave Middlesbrough in June.
Yeah, so similar to Tim Howard, he'll have to come in. He'll leave at the end of the English season. He'll have to wait till the transfer window opens up in North America for him to come back in here to be able to complete that transfer. So he'll start probably around July 4th, around there, like Tim Howard did. It's a weird one when you're coming immediately after. And, keepers are a bit different maybe, but we did see Howard get injured after the fact when it came to Colorado. But keepers can be, players that come in after playing a full European season tend to struggle. That said, Jamingo didn't, so it's not impossible to see him having a solid season for there. Atlanta continues to make a lot of the noise when it comes to bringing in big names and trying to compete right off of the hop. We'll be very curious to watch them play. I'll tell you what, when the preseason streams start to pop up, I will probably make an effort to make sure I watch Atlanta United play, even though the preseason shouldn't tell you anything. It's still going to be very interesting to see how that collection of players works together.
I still can't wait to see all the finalized roster over the next week and a half too, because it's all well and good. The camps are starting, but we all know how the rosters are. There's an ebb and flow to the rosters right now. There's going to be cuts. There's going to be more people called in and joining late in the camp, and maybe even big signings. Those are the type of thing we might see in the next few weeks. I can't wait to see finalized roster for all the club in MLS, right? Because both of us are in markets where our club didn't make any splash this offseason. Continuity and giving me a chance to the young players is part of the new identity of both Montreal and Toronto for the 2017 season, and I can't wait to see the actual roster so we can start at least to analyze them a bit and maybe start thinking about our 2017 season preview.
Yeah, look, in Toronto, John Molinaro reported the trialists that are in camp, and it's not. In past years, that everyone would have been talking about that. We would have probably spent 15 minutes talking about that because CFC would have desperately needed these trialists to step up. But in this particular year, there's three of them there. There's a midfielder, there's a defender, and I believe there's a winger forward that's there as well. if one of them does, great, but by and large, it's not really required. But yeah, when you look at teams like Atlanta, you want to see what they look like on paper and sit down and evaluate it. Certainly Minnesota, which is fascinating to me in an entirely different level. You want to really have a good look at them when they're all together. Lots of things to handicap.
As you're aware,
the teams that are most stable are tend to be the ones that do better the next year. But there's always a surprise team out there, and you kind of want to start thinking about who 2017 surprise will be this year. Who's going to step up and do something unexpected? And when you start to look at those rosters early on, you might be able to figure some of that stuff out.
And to finish the show, Duane, Gareth Ledgeway Garth Lagerwey of Seattle, the GM of Seattle, which I had the chance to talk to at MLS Cup. So if you want to listen to Garth talk about Seattle's season from a few weeks ago, go to the archive of Soccer Today. But he mentioned that the CCL qualification for the U.S. spots will be a combined way to get them for the 18-19 CCL, which will be the first one with the knockout stage for the MLS club only in the spring.
Yeah, but MLS wants the teams that most recently qualified to be playing in the most recent tournament, and of course with the change, which I still hate it, but at any rate, it's done now. They're going to need to adjust it. So what Ledgeway said was that Ledgeway said, I always say his name wrong. Anyway, is that they would combine the sort of the 17 and 18 sort of results. So they'll probably do I bet you it'll be something to do with the table. That they'll do it similar to how the CSA did it with the year when they gave it to Vancouver because they had the most points. They'll do something like that, I suspect. But it'll be a combined thing over the 2 years, so that the teams going in are the most high end. They don't want to have a situation where they're qualifying a team that then just is not even close to the same team, close to the same strength by the time they start playing. You look at TFC and their qualification into the 2018-19 tournament, or sorry, it'd be the 17-18 tournament. They won't even start play until 20 months after they qualified, and that is ridiculous, and we all understand that. The CSA is going to have to address this as well. It's unfortunate that the Voyageurs Cup is going to be impacted next year because of this, but you're going to have a guy qualify? It'd be 20 months again for whoever qualifies if they do put him in. So I don't know what the answer is other than it's a dilemma for Canadian fans.
Win the Voyageurs Cup, and in 20 months, the club that you used to play for will go to the CCL.
Yeah, I don't even know what the answer is. Maybe to wait. I love the Voyageurs Cup, but I just don't. Yes, they can have it when it doesn't have a direct qualification spot on the line, but what's going to happen is it'll just be a complete kids tournament at that point, and that'll be fine for guys like us, and we'll probably enjoy it on that level, but the vast majority of fans and the season ticket holders will view that as a complete non-value in their package, and there will be, a pushback against that. And that I don't like that, because that is ultimately going to make people look at that tournament that are on the outside of the hardcore side of things now poorly, even when it does matter after that. So it's just, I hate this change. It's just really selfish of the teams that are doing it, in my opinion, to ignore, it's not helping anyone anyway. The other answer would be to just completely not play the Voyageurs Cup in 2018, and that'd be a shame too. They could,
but then you start it on the next season where, it might be a benefit in the long term though, because if we want to open it up and make it longer, you're going to have the opportunity to do so, having basically the whole year to make sure that you have your winner to just start playing a few months later in the spring in the CCL.
Yeah, I suppose you could have. I don't think they should cancel it outright. They could. If they want to include other teams in it, they can maybe, make it open and give the MLS teams whatever, let them put their second teams in if they want. If they want to do that this year, and then maybe that means that if you do that, though, I think you have to open it up completely for this current season and let the PLSQ winners, let the League One Ontario winners in there, let the Canadian Amateur champions in there, hell, let the Pacific Coast teams win, whatever, anyone in there that you can, to try and make it a tournament, to try and generate some interest in lesser places, so that that maybe the MLS teams won't necessarily win at this time, and then you have that champion that's not going to go to the CCL, so you don't really need to worry about the quality, but they've got to win this trophy. You've got to finally open it up. People feel a little more comfortable, but then you bring the MLS teams back in full-fledged for the tournament that's going to qualify for the CCL the next year. That might be an answer. that's only going to appease the hardcores again, but nonetheless, at least you're not pissing off the casual season ticket holder that looks at that ticket in its package and goes, why am I paying for this?
Yeah, exactly. All right, for Duane Rollins, I am Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute. You can follow me on Twitter at Kev Laramee. And until tomorrow, 10 a.m. for another Soccer Today, well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.